Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to get live. We're going to get caught up on all of these events going on. If you're tuning in late to the show this morning, if you woke up late, go into the play frame of the live show and hit the 125% speed button or the 150% speed. But if I could talk this morning, right? The 150% speed button, and that will get you caught up to everyone else in the chat. These are just little hacks and tricks that I've learned over the years to get through content if I'm researching, and also get caught up on live streams if I tune in late. Today we're going to get into the Congress killer. We're going to call him, and they're saying they have now caught this individual. And then later in the show, we're going to get into stock moves in the stock market just before the pandemic kicked off that suggests that all the people in leadership around the world knew exactly what was going to happen before it happened based on some of these stock moves. Now, this will be a hated live stream by the controllers, so rest assured it probably will not get viewed very much. So please do your part to try to get this information out there, because this is very damaging evidence that shows some kind of, predictive programming as well as foreknowledge of events that had not happened. So this is very damaging to the controllers who try to hide this stuff, right? Now, let's get into this Congress killer. Now, this is laughable. These are the pictures, and I couldn't believe this. I saw this on Facebook. I thought it was AI or some kind of joke. But no, this is the guy they're saying dressed up as a police officer, pulled up in a police cruiser, pretending to be a cop, and ended up shooting these Congress people. And he's wearing this bizarre full head mask of like a bald guy. It almost looks like a Jason mask or something, right? And we're supposed to believe all this is true. These are the headlines, you guys. These are the pictures being shown all over the internet. Footage of a man on the doorbell cam matching the description of the shooting suspect. His name is Vance, which is weird as well. That's his first name. So there's something to this. Absolutely 100%. I believe this is psychological programming. The psychological programming here is we will still find you even if you're wearing a mask. Now, why do I think this? Well, it's the timing of it. This happened on the No Kings weekend when a lot of people were wearing masks. So this is the dead giveaway. Now, many of you will remember during the pandemic when I told you guys that there's a reason why they were trying to force everyone to wear masks, and it probably had very little to do with spreading disease. I believed at the time that it had something to do with a control group. If you remember science from high school, you'll remember that there had to be a control group, right? Any experiment had to have a control group. In other words, they have to have like some kind of baseline by which they measure everything else that they're trying to do. In this case, facial recognition. So how do you establish a baseline? Well, you make everybody wear a mask and you see how the algorithms do reading people's faces. And then that gives you your what? Your margin of error, right? So I believe that's what was really going on. And wearing of the masks during the pandemic was the baseline. At some point, this story of this guy, the Congress killer, will be used as a catalyst to make masks illegal, completely illegal. You'll probably be arrested on site if you obscure your face. And they'll say it's because of people like this. And the reason why he wore this grotesque mask in the way he did was to create contrast. In other words, this is the scariest scenario of a person wearing a mask. So there's a spectrum, right? You go from someone who just has like something over their face to, filter out pollen or something, who needs that because they feel like, or there's smoke, maybe there's a wildfire, and you've got just like kind of a rag over your face, just the bottom part of your face. That's one end of the spectrum. And then the other end of the spectrum is a full head mask like this. So they had to give us the extreme example so that they could outlaw all masks under the guise of, hey, someone could be impersonating a police officer and show up to your door. How are you supposed to identify them if they don't have a mask? So I believe that's what's really happening here with this particular situation. And of course, the powers that be will not fully disclose how exactly it is that they were able to find this particular individual, because they did find him and arrested him. And they can find these people within days. We saw it happen several times, if we're to assume these stories are real. They find these people within days or weeks, and yet they're almost never able to find missing children that go missing for months and years using the very same technology. And really, the big secret in the room is that they're using secret technology to find these people. And then they give us these like general, broad explanations. Like they say he was caught on camera. Okay, which camera? Was it a camera from a drone? Caught on a trail camera? Well, how is it that you knew to look in that particular trail camera? And the truth is that they're already using the police surveillance state to quote unquote find these people, right? And they're creating these extreme situations that seem to justify the use of such technology so that you accept it. Because nobody would argue with this, right? Oh, a guy walked up and shot Congress people. We need to do whatever it takes to find this person, right? Is what most people would say. But then when you actually think about it and you realize that they never find missing children. They never find thieves that rip people's houses off, right? It should be pretty easy, right? You've got camera footage. That doesn't guarantee anything anymore. Someone comes and rips off your house, and even if you've got a camera, they never find those people. Why not? They never find carjackers. They never find catalytic converter thieves. You still have to worry about your catalytic converter being stolen, and nothing ever gets done about it. They never solve home robberies unless there's someone who was a witness to it. They never solve online scams where people get their entire bank account wiped out. They just say, "Oh, we're so sorry that happened. That's just what happens." Nobody ever uses the technology to hunt those people down who steal billions of dollars a year from people. So the truth is that if this story was real, they are using the technocracy digital surveillance police state to track these people down using all the data that's collected through cameras, through cell phones. You could call it the all-seeing eye. It's all processed by algorithms, basically a god brain. And it's processed in microseconds. And it's complete with thermal imaging, a drone network that you don't even see, real-time data, GPS, global positioning, facial recognition, and now pre-crime. So now they can go into a sector of cameras and say, okay, it's likely that a crime is created here. Or in this case, it's likely that this guy is within a 10-mile radius of where the crime happened. And we're going to use pre-crime. We're going to zoom in on trails leading in and out of the event where he was likely at. And we're going to go back and look on these cameras. And the database, the data center is storing all this camera data in real time. We can go back and look. They probably have this whole system already set up in place, and they're just waiting to announce it to the world. Now, let's get into the rest of the show today, because this next re-upload that we're going to go through, there's actually 2 re-uploads. We're not going to go through the whole thing, but just the parts that are relevant. Essentially, what this shows is a period of time in the heart of the pandemic lockdowns. I think it was March or April of 2020. And this was a largely uncovered story, even in our truth community. And this deserves another look, because stories like this help people wake up to the lie that we're living in now. What are we going to look at? Well, Trump's stock portfolio was full of pharmaceutical companies before the pandemic was even close to starting. Now, how could this be? Remember, at that time in 2020, Trump was largely against pharmaceutical companies, or so he said. It even came out with statements about how he felt Barron, his son, may have been damaged by some of the things that pharmaceutical companies produced. Remember these videos? Now, why was he invested in pharmaceuticals? Well, I believe it's because he was told what was going to happen. And in fact, I have these 2 re-uploads you're going to see today suggest that not only did Trump know, that the world knew as well, or at least American companies knew and American government and officials. You see, digital surveillance really began with COVID, didn't it? That was the medical phase of all this. And now we are in the criminal digital surveillance phase. They got to test all this. They got to be able to track and trace medical, and they also need to be able to track and trace criminal. Enemies of the state, anyone that resists what's coming, they need to be able to handle these people, to be able to stop them in their tracks before they even get any traction at all, any reach, any relevance. So we are in the criminal digital surveillance phase. Total control, medical and criminal surveillance, all run by artificial intelligence. And this is the only way that they will be able to force everyone, great and small, rich and poor, to take a mark, to buy and sell, and to declare peace and security. Think about it. How else are you going to be able to declare peace and security and force all to take the mark, great and small, rich and poor, free and bond, unless you have the world run by an artificial intelligence, pre-crime surveillance state? Literally, this is going to segue into the mark of the beast. Let's take a look, you guys. First, Donald Trump. Here we go. Now, in doing just a little bit of research, I was able to find this article from 2016 at the start of the T-Man Tarump presidency. And according to this was... Let me pause myself, because understand, we had to speak in code back then. The censorship was so rife that any time I mentioned Trump's name during this era, during the pandemic, anytime I mentioned his name, my videos would be flagged. They would be demonetized, flagged, and as soon as you accumulate a bunch of those on a channel, they will basically turn your channel off. They strike you out. So I was being very careful back then. So apologies for the altered names that I'm giving in this presentation. But let's keep watching here. It was 4 years, almost 5 years before the spam-demic. He was perfectly set up to make a ton of money on his stock portfolio. Pfizer, obviously, the company that has been approved by the F to the D to the A. Here's GlaxoSmithKline. This was Moncef Slaoui, his frontman for Warp Speed. And, of course, Walmart, which was one of the only stores that were allowed to remain open, as well as J&J, of course, who also made a sticker. How is this possible? Now, the sticker is, of course, the V word, the VACCIIIINE. Okay. Now, many of you probably can't even believe what you're looking at here. Wow, this is pretty damaging evidence. The sitting president of the United States in 2016 was perfectly positioned to profit off of the spam-demic. Why didn't this go viral in our truth community? It's because the control mechanism is already in place. This should give anybody pause and question, from MAGA to Q to anybody watching. Let's keep watching. Well, we know how it's possible, because that's what these people do. They plan things in advance. I mean, if I were a betting man, I would say he made a ton of money, and I would bet on this if I was a betting man. But I'm not, of course. But this is how the world goes these days. This is why there is a class of people who can never get ahead, because the game is rigged. Now, of course, the window is rapidly closing to gather evidence on the origins of the CV-19. Of course that's the case, because they're going to cover it up. I mean, were we expecting anything different? And yet, here they are with the cover-up. And of course, they'll say, oh, the evidence is gone, and had we not stalled, had we took this seriously in the beginning, we would have found the evidence. Now let's move on to the rest of the stocks that made weird changes before the pandemic ever even kicked off. Let's watch. That you'll write all this off as chance or coincidence. And this is why I had to look at several different industries instead of just one that were directly affected by what we're all experiencing right now. And what I found is alarming, to say the least. So the first thing I thought of was businesses that were directly affected by the shutdown in either a negative or a positive way, because you got to look at both indicators, right? Like places of gathering, movie theaters, those would be like negatively affected, right? So if we were to see like a diving stock before the spamdemic took off, that would be an indicator that some key people in very high places knew what was going to happen, right? That's just common sense. And then on the other hand, if you look at businesses that they could benefit from the quarantine or the stay-at-home orders, those would be like booming before the quarantine happened, right? And that would indicate some kind of foreknowledge. So we're talking things like delivery services, food delivery services, video teleconferencing, like Zoom. So we would have expected if there was any nefarious activity or any kind of pre-planning, that their stocks would be booming just before the spamdemic, if in fact there was any insider trading going on. Now, before we get into these stock moves, I want to be clear about the timeline of how this spamdemic rolled out. Here it is here. And we have to think back to pre-house arrest, right? We have to think back before the whole thing took off. It's really easy in hindsight to forget how this whole thing rolled out. And in December, absolutely nobody knew, or even January, nobody knew that this whole thing would play out the way that it did. Heck, even in the Super Bowl in early February, mass gathering of the Super Bowl, there was no indication that there would be some worldwide house arrest that would sweep over the globe and that entire economies would be shut down. And I wanted to establish this timeline so that people can understand what was going on when we look at these stock moves. And even as late as February, if a stockbroker had bet on the scenario that we have now, they would have gone down in history as a genie in a bottle, even in February. So here's the timeline. January 2nd, even in the city of Wuhan, the epicenter, 41 admitted to the hospital. Remember, this was very played down, even as in January, early January. So the first we started hearing of it was January. There's January 3rd. There's a couple dozen patients here and there, but definitely no kind of outbreak scenario. January 4th, this is the timeline of how it all went down. Then it went up to 59 cases. January 6th, 7th, it started to kind of take off, but still there were no widespread stay-at-home orders in China. This just didn't happen. A couple other cities picked up 41 confirmed cases all the way in the middle of January. Let's fast forward this down into the end of January and see where things stood at that point. So again, all we're doing now is establishing the level of alert, okay? Here was Fauci, January 22nd. And you could say by early February, that's when all of this really began to kind of kick off, right? So now that we have this timeline established, let's take a look at what was going on with these stock moves. These dumps and buy-ups. Key industries that 4 months after these moves took place were directly affected by the spamdemic. Let's start with Amazon. Now, we could all agree, right now, Amazon is making a killing. For some people, this is the only source where they can get their toilet paper, for instance, right? Let's blow this up a little bit. Makes it a little bit easier for you guys to see. All right, so this is Amazon. I put it on the 5-year chart here. And of course, right now we're all paying a premium right now to get our goods and services, or our goods delivered to our doorstep through Amazon, right? Because a lot of us don't want to fight the crowds, and we're ordered to stay home. Look at this 5-year chart. September, October, November, December. Let's take a look here. You see, normally in 2000 and let's see, this is 2017. Look at this. October, November, December 2017, sorry. 2018, you see the stock normally takes a steady decline, or it levels out. Look at this. October, November, December took a large sharp fall. But yet, during the same time frame in 2019, the stock did just the opposite. It slowly inclined. Here it is here. And took a sharp rise in January. Look at this jump here. From 1861 a share all the way up to 2,134. Like a 20% increase in stock before anything really happened, in America at least. And there were concerns rising in China during that time frame from January to February, when it really began to take off over there. But here in the States, nothing. So what's up with this big jump right here? And what's up with the slow increase from October to January? Whereas back here in 2018, during the same time frame, it was precipitously dropping off during that same time frame. Something changed. Now, this is just one indicator, and you can make different excuses and whatever the case may be. But let's look at some other stuff. Oil. Let's go to this one. Another industry directly affected by the stay-at-home orders. Why? Because much less oil is being used around the world, right? So the question is, did the stock do something to indicate that they knew this was coming? Here we have a steady decline beginning all the way back January 6th. Oh. Houston, we have a problem. Hold on, you guys. I don't know what's going on with this. Don't want to play. Uh-oh, here we go. Technical difficulties. Shut it down. Can't show the world this. Wow. I think my computer froze. Brand new computer. Let's see here. Let's see if we can figure this out. Wow. You guys still there? No idea what's going on. It says we're still streaming. Why isn't it playing? Again, this was before China's widespread crackdown, right? January 6th. From that point forward, oil really never recovered. February, this is right around the Super Bowl. Again, large gatherings in America. And still, they had a small jump there, and then this is when the bottom just came right out of it. Let's look at a bigger window. Let's look at the 6-month window. That's what we're looking at there. Let's look at more years here, so we can get a pattern of this. So, right around that same time frame, back the year prior, oil and gas was taking off. Look at this. Hit a low here in December 2018. Okay, and then what happened? Boom, big buy up, right? Boom, 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 going up, up, up all the way into February. But yet, for some reason, during that same time frame, down here, same exact time frame, it was doing exactly the opposite. Remember, this was all pre-CV, right? So, we just showed you two stocks directly affected by what was going to happen, and they were doing exactly the opposite of what they normally do during the same time frame. What else do we have here? This is Zoom. I actually had Grubhub pulled up here too. Here it is. Let's do Grubhub first. One of the most popular food delivery services, right? Making a killing right now off of everything that's going on. And so again, using the same logic, they're booming because of the stay-at-home orders. Look at this. We had stock drop off. They were in a precipitous decline going into November 1st.
And then all of a sudden they started recovering and going up. Why November 1st? This was long before the CV was ever even named, before even the first case. Why was there people buying up stock in something in an essential service that would be needed? Somebody knew something. You're going to see this November 1st date seemed to be the epicenter of where all this started to go down. Seemed to be the magic month. Let's zoom this in. Well, I wanted to show you this. So the year prior, what was happening? Boom, right here. Here's the end of 2018. The same exact period, the stock was doing just the opposite. It was falling off all the way into from November down into December. Instead, here it does exactly the opposite. I just showed you 3 stocks doing exactly the opposite of what they normally do in the exact same time frame. Now, again, I told you this kind of information, they do not want people to see it. The only way people are going to see this is if you share this video. My last video I did, my live show yesterday, has been definitely censored. You could tell just by the view count compared to the views on all my live shows. It's about half of what it normally is. So when you see that happening as a subscriber, that's when you know you need to share the video even more, because it's being censored and silenced and not put in people's feeds and so on and so forth. So, what would have happened if you would have invested in Grubhub on November 1st and then pulled your money out in January? Well, you would have doubled your money. You would have turned $1 million into $2 million in 2 months. All of this before it ever hit American shores. Now, it's dropped off again, but their money was made. See that? Their money was made. Now, what else do we have here? Let's go back to Zoom. Now, Zoom was adopted as like the #1 teleconferencing app for children that were forced to stay home, right? So we could look at this and go, wow, this company is doing very well. Let's take a look at the 1 month. Let's go to the 6 month here. This company is doing very well right now as a result of this shutdown. And so you would expect that we could look at this and see indicators of what was happening in the history of this. And what do we have here? December, this was on a precipitous decline, and all of a sudden, magically in December, and we remember the timeline. Do not forget the timeline. December 6th, there wasn't much going on with this. Barely mentioned in the news. Yet, Zoom's stock started to pick up steam in December, early December. Remember, something happened November, December. The elite got the memo saying, start buying this stock because it's going to do this. So, let's say you bought down here at $60 a share. And you kept that until March. So what is that? December, January, February, and the entire month of March. In 4 months, you would have made from 62 to 151. You almost tripled your money. You turned $1 million into $2.5 million. Do you see now that this was all talked about and planned on some level way above our heads? Now, I could expect that in March 13th, Friday the 13th, the day that Donald Trump declared the national emergency, Friday the 13th, March 13th, I can understand that right at about this point, you can kind of understand this stock going up here, because people at that point knew that there was a very strong possibility that we would all be told to stay home, even though it's never happened in the history of the United States. And so there was a big buy up of stocks like Zoom, like right here. But this makes no sense at all. Back in December, this makes no sense at all. Their stock was on the decline. Why at this point? So now we're into 4 separate stocks that I just showed you that seem to indicate that something is amiss. What else can we look at? Now I want you guys to put your ideas in the chat of stocks that you'd like me to look at as we start to close in on the end of this show.
All right, so I will put a link, of course, to both of those shows to show how they were doing this. They all had it planned. Everybody else got the memo except for the people who had no idea we were going to be locked down for an entire year, almost 2 years. they made all their money. They made millions and billions of dollars off of our lockdowns. There was absolutely foreshadowing and foreknowledge. Now, in that show, I actually that we look at a couple of other stocks that continue to confirm that something happened in November or December before COVID was ever even announced, even in China, where stock moves were taking place and people were doubling and tripling their money. You guys, this is huge news. This should be front page news. This should be mainstream news, shouldn't it? But it won't, because information is now controlled. Truth is now very rare. You guys have heard the truth, but will this ever get out to the rest of the world? It will not, likely, because they already control it. And that should give you pause. If they're already controlling the truth, then you can't believe anything you see in the mainstream, because that means that they're not allowing truth to actually resonate and go anywhere. So that was the show for today. I hope you guys got something out of it. This is absolutely something you can show your family and friends. Well, we already know family and friends are pretty much lost. There's no conversations you're going to be able to have at this point to help people wake up, because the strong delusion is upon us. But even the rest of the truth community should see something like this. It's another tool in our tool belt to have power. Could you imagine if a channel like Joe Rogan covered these stock moves just before the pandemic? Because obviously he's the most popular channel on YouTube. It could actually change something. It could actually get people to think and go, wow, that's really weird that Trump and the rest of the world knew, the rich people knew about these investments before all this happened. Remember, the key component of this was the lockdowns. Once you're locked down, certain stocks will prosper, certain stocks will fail. That's just the nature of a lockdown. Less gas usage, more Amazon, more Zoom, more electricity, less, less whatever. But we just went through all the scenarios in those two shows from the lockdown era of the world. All right, I'm in the chat, you guys. What's going on with you this morning? Wow. Now, if you didn't check out the pinned comment, I posted a link to Facebook. Apparently, you don't have to be on Facebook. You don't have to be on Facebook to click on the link and check out the image that I uploaded of Clover the deer. If you're interested in that, from the Honey Milk Ranch, it's in the pinned chat here, right here. Just click on that, and it'll take you to Clover the deer on my Facebook page. And if you want to follow me on Facebook, I'll approve you if you want to follow me on Facebook if you're still on there. I'll probably be uploading, images here and there from the ranch over the course of the next little while. Do some reveals of things that I haven't done in a while. So, yeah, if you're still on Facebook, check that out after we end the show today. I love each and every one of you, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll likely see you tomorrow. I don't know what we're going to cover yet, but I'll likely see you guys tomorrow. Much love, you guys. Take care.